Hello, everyone. Welcome to the AI Journalism Lab Showcase. It's so great to see all of you here, joining us from all over the world. So go ahead and drop in the chat where you're joining us from, what your name is, and we'd love to hear more. We are just gonna get started here, just getting everyone into the room, and I'm so excited to see all of you here. Um, Okay. Well, we got quite a few participants already, so we're going to just get started. Welcome to the AI Journalism Lab Showcase. My name is Nikita Roy. I am a Knight Fellow at the International Center for Journalists, host of the Newsroom Robots podcast, and I am very excited to be here we're leading the AI Journalism Lab and showcasing and highlighting some of the incredible work that people have taken over the last few years. Joining me today are speakers from our program. 8 of them are going to be highlighting projects that they've been working on. So we have Dustin Block from Wearfora, Caiwei Chen, a freelance journalist, David Cohn from Advanced Local, Selymar Colón from Red Ventures Puerto Rico, Rodney Gibbs from National Trust for Local News, Monsur Hussain, Center for Journalism, Innovation and Development, Ludwig Siegele, The Economist, and Clare Spencer, who's formerly at NewsQuest and now product manager at Podmorph. So we have this incredible lineup of speakers. As you can see, we have newsroom leaders, product leaders, journalists, all of whom have been working and experimenting with AI as part of this AI Journalism Lab. And they're going to be talking about the projects that they have been working on for the past few months and the insights, the lessons that they've learned, and practical takeaways on how AI is impacting journalism from their own experience. And so just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you want to ask questions, please use the Q&A function for that. We will not be looking at any of the questions in the chat. And use the chat to introduce yourself. Just let us know where you're coming and joining from, and we'd be glad to see all of this global participants joining us. And please note that there will be a recording available, so as long as you've registered for this and we have your email, we'll be sending that out as well. And just quickly to show you, this is one of the most innovative group of leaders and journalists who are really ahead in terms of thinking about AI and its integration into journalists. This is our inaugural cohort of the AI Journalism Lab, which we now have multiple different AI Journalism Lab programs focusing on leadership, on adoption, on community engagement. But these 25 people have been some of the most forward-thinking journalists that I've had the pleasure of being part of this group with, and helping think about the adoption and future of AI in journalism. And so with that, we are just a quick background about the AI Journalism Lab and what it is. This is a 3-month hybrid tuition-free program launched by the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at CUNY with support and funding from Microsoft. We had this idea and this goal that we wanted to help journalists really understand, navigate generative AI so that we could use it to benefit our industry and reinforce trust from communities and increase the impact in the way we do journalism. So across the 3-month program, we touched on different types of concepts, from how to play around with tools like ChatGPT to, more fundamentally, how do we build generative AI products? How do we build an AI culture within our newsroom? And how do we build an AI strategy? And most importantly, how do we report on AI itself? And across these 3 months, participants were paired with coaches who were then working on their own capstone project, which was a project where they could actively experiment with AI, with the concepts that they had been learning in the classrooms and that they could apply to their newsrooms directly. And so that's what today's all about. We're highlighting 8 of these participants and their projects. So to get started, I'm going to be getting started with Rodney Gibbs. He is he's at the National Trust for Local News. And Rodney, we're going to kick it off with you.
Wonderful. Can you hear me, Nikita?
Yes, can hear you.
And
And you
see the
can see
slides, I
your,
hope.
and I can see your slides.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And wow, it's pretty amazing looking at the list of people from around the world. So glad to be here. I'm with National Trust for Local News. We are a nonprofit that operates 65 legacy news publications, mostly in rural and suburban areas around the United States. A couple things about us to set the table for what we're doing here is these are all very small newsrooms, like one, two, three, sometimes five people. There's no product or tech people in most of these newsrooms. And many of them are really discovering the web for the first time. Some have never had a website until the last year or so. They've been printing paper for 100 or more years, but their experience on the web has been very small. So when I joined the program, the AI CUNY program in the spring, it was around the same time we started having serious AI discussions within the National Trust. And it really paralleled a lot of the things we were discussing and learning about in the CUNY program. So for us, this journey has started with having really frank and vulnerable conversations with the leaders of all of our newsrooms. There was a lot of fear and anxiety about AI. The general stuff you hear about with, it's going to steal our jobs and robots aren't trustworthy. But even for these small newsrooms who were overwhelmed by just basic web technology for some of them, AI was just a whole other level of worrisomeness. And it really helped to put those things on the table and talk about it. And then to really start demystifying AI and showing how it could help support journalism and not replace journalists. We started introducing small ways to use AI in just the normal workflows. So in the middle there was a simple tool I built to help our reporters create alt text for photos. Alt text is very important for lots of reasons, and it's a pain to type it out. So using this little generator was a good way for the reporters to test and use AI in a way that really saved them some time in everyday task. And then on the right was another example where some of our newsrooms are so small, they don't typically have a graphics department or even a graphics person who's just a reporter who's good at graphics. So the graphics are often either missing or they're poor or they're stock images. So using AI to create little design kits so that we can have some consistency of brand and imaging across it. So created these little flowers that are tied to each of our newsrooms in Georgia that go into all the newsletter signups to give a little consistency. And that led to, my capstone project, the big focus of my work in the CUNY program. So with our digital transformation of these newsrooms, we're also, in addition to all the technological stuff we're doing, we're also introducing the user needs model. And some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with this. It's a kind of an innovative way to address your editorial content that focuses on what the users want versus what the reporters want. And it's really big in Europe, and it's starting to catch on in the States. And frankly, we're behind in this. So, this is the hypothesis that these many small newsrooms, if they start using this user needs framework, it'll increase their relevancy to their public. And it's not a complicated idea, but it's a little abstract and hard to get someone's head around sometimes. So my capstone project focused on creating an AI-driven tool that helps the reporters look at a story they've written, feed it through Claude, and then to assess which user need it addresses, because we based it on the user needs model of 6 different user needs, and then suggest follow-up stories, subsequent stories that they could write that address complementary user needs. So in this example here, VP candidate Tim Walz swung through Macon, Georgia, which is a small town in Georgia where we have a publication. We wrote a story about his visit. There you see on the left. So I took the text, popped it through Claude. What the prompt is instructing it to do is to say, okay, you are a user needs expert, and we framed it in as jobs to be done. And it asks Claude to assess which user needs this hits and then score it and say what user needs it misses. So with that Tim Wall story, it scores very high on the inform scale. This is after it came through the AI. It scores poorly, as you see on investigate, enrich, and provoke. So Tim Walz came through the town for a few hours. He was gone. The reporters were thinking, well, there's still a lot of interest in this and the election, but there's Tim Walz is not back tomorrow. So what could we do? So then the tool suggests, okay, if you want to have an enriched story, here are some headlines of what that story might look like. 5 ways to get involved in local politics. Because enrich, as you see, there's no enrichment on that scale. So here's some enrichment ideas. Similar for investigate. That story about Tim Walz had no investigative angle, but if they wanted to have investigative angle on VP politics or presidential politics, here's some ways. And same for provoke. So, I tried different ways of doing this, like generating possible story summaries or budget lines. And I found with some just little testing with some of our reporters that creating a headline was, one, the simplest way to get their head around it, and two, kind of gave them a vision of like, okay, I could see doing an opinion piece about what this top one, what it reveals about flaws in modern campaigning. And so these headlines are not meant to be, here's your headline, go write the story that supplements or completes it, but really to give them a roadmap where they could go and ideas to go with it. So what's next with this is we've done a little guerrilla testing with individuals. We're starting to test it more with teams in our small newsrooms. I'm still playing with the prompt and the scoring, and we're starting to do the training for user needs, but we're bringing this in as a tool so they can understand the concept in the training and then tool to give them direction on where they would actually take it. So that's it. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thanks, Rodney. That was so inspiring to see. Just impact of AI in local news. If you have any questions for Rodney, please put that in the Q&A tab. And we will move on to our next presentation from Selymar Colón. She is the Managing Director of Platia Media at Red Ventures, Puerto Rico.
Thank you so much, Nikita. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me in this. I want to talk really quick about the project and my capstone that I got the chance and the privilege to do in the past 3 months, and with the guidance and help with all the amazing colleagues and Nikita. So I always love to use this GIF on a lot of my presentations that have to do with journalism. I'm a journalist, and I feel like always when we're in the middle of breaking news or any deadline, this is kind of how I feel, right? And my colleagues in newsrooms as well. So one of the things that I set out to do in the local newsroom that I was working before Platea, where I'm at right now at the new digital media in Puerto Rico, was how can we, one of the bottlenecks in the newsroom is distribution. And we're always talking, how can we better improve distribution and maximize its use? But usually those teams are the smaller teams in the newsroom. So that's why you create the bottleneck. So what about if we create a chatbot for social media copy to help the teams improve the outcome of that? Probably if you've already done this test, this is one of the first things a lot of us have done when 2 years ago, I lose track of time, OpenAI came about, was, oh, let's try this for social media. And usually the outcome was really, really, really bad. So, and that, you kind of lost maybe hope on it. But when you actually learn, which is the experience I had with the program, about how to get AI to work for you, right? And to actually become your co-pilot on this. So that's what we set out to do. It's like, let's do it. Let's build something that it's useful for the newsroom. So it was to build that tool to assist the newsroom and the social media editors in composing copies for various platforms while maintaining the publication style and voice. That was the most important thing, because if you don't necessarily do the process of training and building something custom for your newsroom, it's going to be really hard to get what you're looking for, the quality of that content. One thing that's super important, I mentioned I'm a journalist. I have no training in programming whatsoever, so I was able to build this with code-free, non-code platforms in that sense. So the most important thing of this was kind of that process, understanding first what problem we were trying to solve and what we needed to build for the newsroom to be useful. So that process, it's kind of small here, but it was starting with, once we understood, we want to build a tool for social media that can help the newsroom write better copies and write copies in general, and that can help them in those moments of bottleneck. Besides the other programs that are out there for automation that not necessarily get the right tone for the media outlet. So the first thing was identify the content on social media that had generated the most links to the website, the most referrals. And so we downloaded that data, cleaned it. That was super important on that portion of it. And we started training with one of the programs what was the output that we were looking for in that tone and voice. There's way more processes than this, and I can't go over, but it was basically getting the data from social media, from our own pages, then on the CMS, getting that content clean from the articles, then working on Google Sheets with the data, cleaning the data and the inputs and outputs that we were expecting. Using OpenAI was the LLM that we used to train this, then using VectorShift, which is a no-code platform where we trained and we created that process, and then we integrated this with Slack. So it was easier for the newsroom to also, for adaptation, right? In general, I'm gonna go really quick over that. This is kind of what it looked like, that data integration and those documents, getting that, the first one here is the data that you usually get from Facebook, and then cleaning it in, telling the system, what do you want? I'm a social media editor that's writing copy for this. What would be the input and output of that? Then we cleaned it for the fine tuning. One of our colleagues, Russell Chan, created a custom GPT that made it a lot easier. Again, I did already mention, I'm not an engineer, a developer. So this made it super easy for me to create it from a CSV file to a JSON-L to be able to do the fine tuning. And then this is what it looks like on the VectorShift platform, that training of the chatbot of what we wanted it to do, and testing it with two different outputs. And the best output that we, after testing that we like the most, that's the one that we use. And then integrating with the newsroom, as I mentioned, for that easier deployment for the newsroom and activation. Some results that we saw on this was for content recirculation. The tool was most useful for that when you're kind of redistributing content and you're maybe blocked in, what would be the best copy for this, helping generating that curiosity and that, fresh copy for the content. When you have the creative blog, some things that we still had to work on was the workflow efficiencies. I wasn't working necessarily with links, the chatbot, so we had to copy the article from our CMS as clean as possible. So in that bottleneck also, it might be, it might take a bit more time than we expected to go through those processes. So that needs to be still worked on and improved. But so far for the newsroom, it did help when it came to recirculating, and the results for the copy was as expected, because it was with the voice and tone of the publication. And the most important thing is this always went through an editor before being published. Some other takeaways we got from this is you gotta have a clear proposal of what you want to accomplish. Take the time to finding and cleaning the right data for this. Test as much as you can. The team buy-in, like Rodney was mentioning, is super important, and it's key to adoption. The custom-built chatbot can also help journalists, and the integration with tools that they already use, like Slack in our case, to adapt to AI more easily and to start gaining that trust on it, and to understanding, being part of how is this built. And also it's really important in all of our newsrooms to have more than one AI champion. In the case, for things to you have like ambassadors, right? In different areas, and you have continuity on those projects. So that's it. That's what we built, and we were super excited. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sally. I love how you were somebody who never coded before and were able to build out this tool with the power of no code to see how AI can really help us drive engagement. And then in another project that we have now is from Monsur Hussain, who is joining us from Nigeria. He is the head of innovation at the Center for Journalism, Innovation, and Development. So Monsur, welcome.
Thank you so much, Nikita, and thank you, everyone. So, yeah, what I'm presenting is on the AI-powered trend monitoring system for fact-checking. And the Dubois is the fact-checking arm of the CJID, and currently they have a WhatsApp subscribers base of over 700,000 people. And we realized that we needed to serve this number of people by bringing a chatbot, specifically for information verification and reporting of misinformation. So the chatbot was built, and the features were, about the real-time fact-check verification and submission of claims for review by our fact checkers, and also for the users to get the latest fact checks from Dubois. So rather than going to the website, you could also do the same on WhatsApp. So now the problem with that was that there was misinformation overload, too many claims to manually sort through. So our fact checkers, they needed to keep track of what people were trying to verify, because, if people are trying to verify something, then it means they might have come across something related to that. And also, it was really difficult to prioritize what should be addressed first. What should we investigate? So these were the problems, and this was what I tried to tackle with my capstone projects for the AI in Journalism Lab. So the solution that was built is the trend monitoring system, which is integrated into the Dubois WhatsApp chatbots. And what it does is an automated classification and ranking of all the claims that have been verified or reported. And since the launch of the chatbots in May, there's been almost 2,000 claims, either verified or reported by users. So a lot of them come in daily. So and also we integrated this feature of the trend monitoring system into Slack, so the fact checkers get notified, and it is integrated into their workflow. So this is an interface of the trend monitoring system that was designed, and this was built with OpenAI models, and we leveraged data of all the fact checks that have been done by Dubois since 2018 to train the system on what is a fact check worthy claim. So now, people ask silly questions and all of that, and there's so many things going on. But then what is a fact check worthy claim? So we use the database of all the fact checks that were verified by Dubois since 2018 to train this OpenAI, to fine-tune the OpenAI model and to prompt it to generate this for us. So basically you select the start date and an end date, and you just click on submit, and the system automatically classifies similar claims together, and then it ranks all of the claims according to their fact check worthiness. So from this one, you can see the first one, it gives you the claim summary. 2 individuals associated with NPP have been flown to Germany for medical treatment. And on the last column, you can see the claims. So there are 2 of them here. Napo has been flown to Germany for medical treatment. NPP's running mate has been flown to Germany for medical treatment. So these are claims by different people. And if different people are asking similar things, then there might be something going on. So that is the essence of this. And also on the next one, protesters in Nigeria arrested last month have been charged with treason, and their trials are beginning today. So on the last column, you can see the claim: the NBAD government in Nigeria protesters who were arrested last month have been charged for treason, and their trial starts today. So this, at a glance, gives our fact checkers, it gets them to the most relevant information in less amount of time, and they don't have to sort through, perhaps like 100 different claims before knowing where to channel their energy to investigate or to make explainers on. And here is a screenshot of the claim of the trend monitoring system that was integrated into Slack. So after we launched the first version, we noticed that a lot of people didn't want to go to the website and log into their admin dashboard. So it was better to have it integrated into the Slack channel, which is where communications happen, and they make decisions on what should be fact checked or not. So it was integrated here, and the user experience was much better for our fact checkers. So the ethical questions around this, I think the first one was ensuring that the algorithm doesn't unfairly deprioritize or ignore certain types of claims, and also balancing human intervention with AI decision making. So to combat this, that was why we trained it on all of the fact checks that have actually been done by Dubois themselves. So there's a good understanding of what is a fact check worthy claim. And also the claims are just ranked, and then the humans make a decision on whether to fact check or not. And lessons learned is the real-time integration with Slack increased fact check productivity a lot. And thanks to Nikita as well for pointing that out to me. And the automated ranking system, it helped improve the speed and accuracy of addressing critical misinformation for the team. And that's really the deal for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Monsur. It's so great to see how you've been able to use AI to help us get more verified information into the people's hands and combat misinformation in that way. Please put your questions for Monsur and all of our panelists so far in the Q&A chat. We will be taking a quick break and answering your questions after our next panelist, who is going to be David Cohn. He is the Senior Director of Research and Development at Advanced Local. David, the floor is all yours.
Hi, thank you very much. I am going to share my screen. Are you guys seeing my screen?
And it's just loading. Yes, I can see it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. It's good to see everybody from all around the world. My name is David Cohn. During my capstone, I wanted to apply generative AI to boost and understand audience engagement. To put it in some perspective, I work for Advanced Local, which is an organization that has like 10 local news sites across the United States. We actually removed comments, for example, about maybe close to 10 years ago. So users are not able to comment on our site. And I spent a lot of my career early on, especially looking into things. Sometimes it was called the wisdom of the crowds or crowdsourcing or citizen journalism, the idea that the audience could get engaged very highly with the journalism. That makes journalism more transparent, more participatory, and better all around. Early sayings were things like, my readers know more than I do, and the people formerly known as the audience. And there were challenges, though, throughout this, right? So from 2004 to 2010 in my career, right, that was a real sort of pursuit, was the idea that can we get collective knowledge and can that add up to things? An example that we're kind of very familiar with is if I hold up a jar of jelly beans and lots of people guess how many, jelly beans are in the jar, can we kind of aggregate that knowledge and have that be a good guess? And that can be applied to journalism in lots of ways. An early experiment that we did, again, back in this like 2006-07 era was got a lot of people together. Everybody rode bikes in different direction in downtown Oakland and noted where the potholes were. And pretty soon we had a really good picture of where all the potholes were. That would take one reporter, months on end, but we were able to do it basically in an afternoon. But there were challenges to it. It was very difficult to do. And so one of the things that I wanted to see was one of the biggest challenges was essentially the funnel of information still had to be analyzed by a single person. And that created a bottleneck. And could we take that same process, that same kind of genre of engaging the audience and use generative AI to do processing essentially to identify the important themes and to highlight the relevant comments to that theme. So I'm about to show you a quick video where on the back end, I created a generative AI process whereby after a call out is made. So in the video, you're going to see one of our news organizations ask their audience who they're voting for and why, essentially, Trump or Harris, and what's motivating them to get to the poll. We got over, I want to say around 300 replies. And then you're going to see in the video that is ingested, it's uploaded, and then a generative AI looks across all of the sort of comments, finds 5 or 6 themes, what is driving people to the polls, and then we'll find for each of those themes 2 or 3 comments that best exemplify the theme. So to show what that looks like, here is the video. You can see here, that's the spreadsheet with all the answers. I'm uploading it to this backend tool that I've created. And the question, of course, is what issues will bring you to the voting booth? And then you can see here, theme 1, migrants and border security, right? So, and it describes that theme. And then it found comments that best exemplify that theme around migrants and border security. The second theme was inflation. This one was women's rights. This one is climate change. And so it describes the theme and then again finds comments that best exemplify that theme. So in a matter of moments, rather than having to try and analyze and digest those 300 plus comments, you're able to get an overview of them in moments. The reporter still goes in and kind of, gets a sense of it themselves, but they're not going in blind. They have a good sense of what are the major topics that were discussed. So another example of this being used, you can see here, we had like 400 or 500 comments on what do you think cannabis laws should be in the state of Texas. And again, we took some of the themes that came out, medical benefits and health. Here are some of the comments. And another one was economic and legal considerations, right? Freedoms, etc. Right. And at the bottom, one thing that I really liked what this reporter did at the bottom, they did another call out. What would you tell the Texas Attorney General? We got a bunch of comments there, and that turned into another story of what you would tell the Texas Attorney General. So we've been using this on all kinds of different topics. Another popular one that we've been doing it with is sports. So things like, hey, what do you think of our team's defense? What do you think of the rookie quarterback, or whatever the sort of sports topic du jour might be? Again, getting fan analysis and being able to turn that quickly into content, almost like an analysis or like a Freudian analysis of the readers' comments. Feedback on local laws, you saw, and we talked about feedback on the local topics, what's motivating to the polls, feedback on traffic. It doesn't have to be call outs either. We've seen that in addition to call outs from the public that we have made, we've also used this to quickly analyze things like FOIA requests. We've done FOIA requests and gotten 500-600 public comments, and this will ingest it and again give the reporter a quick understanding of what the comments are all about, social media aggregation, etc. Some quick lessons. One, less can be more often, especially when you're trying to sort of drive change. I think an original version of this that I created tried to do too much rather than make it a collaboration and make sure that there's someone behind the wheel who's really trying to like steer the car, so to speak. Prompt chaining is your friend, right? Again, what happens in the back end once you've uploaded is actually a series of prompts. Each one does kind of a little job, and then they add up, and then we collect all those little jobs and add them up. Adoption means iteration, right? And that is also how you interact with the audience, right? For something like this, again, we have not had comments on our site for probably close to 10 years. And so the audience has to get used to this idea of engaging with us just as much as we have to get used to the idea of like what makes a good call out, how do we inspire that, and how do we get in the flow of that. And part of this is all about documentation. Again, the art of the call out must kind of be relearned for both the journalist and the audience. That is it from me. I will end my screen share
Yes, great.
and pass it back to Nikita.
Thank you, David. And if we can have all the other three panelists as well join us, we will just open up for a quick Q&A with our first four panelists and get started with some questions. We've had a lot of thoughtful questions over here, so please continue to put them in the Q&A tab. So let's start off with a question that I think will be valuable for everyone over here, especially those that are just beginning their AI journey. There's a question over here that is, what are the most important things you wish you knew about AI as a journalism student? But maybe we can make this more general and talk about what do you think you would have liked to know when you were getting started on your AI journey. So let's start off, maybe Rodney, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I mean, it's simple, but I think for journalism students and others who are in their careers, not be afraid of it, to jump in and just get your feet wet. I think I was fairly early, but I was also daunted and thought, oh, I'm not an engineer, I can't do this. And Nikita's podcast and other resources demystified it for me quite a bit. And so I think that's huge. I have a student or a kid, I'm sorry, who's a senior in high school, and I'm trying to get him to learn to use it. So we should talk about, like, there's so many ways to use it that are not, I think, the way people go to in journalism of writing stories. There's so much more that can help journalism that's not, the bad stuff of robots taking our jobs. So I'll shut up with that.
Sally, I'd love to hear your perspectives. As somebody leading an organization and never coded before, what do you think people should know about AI when getting started?
Definitely, I'm gonna, what Ronnie was saying. First of all, also at the beginning, I think we were all kind of questioning, right? Where is this coming from? So the basics of learning what's behind it, understanding the terms, it was so important for me to really understand the big picture and practical use cases. That I, that I could get started, instead of just imagining it like, this huge thing that, oh my God, I don't know to code. How am I even I can't even try it. And once you start learning and understanding the history of it, where this comes from, the terms, you gain a whole new vocabulary thanks to you, Nikita, and the course. And once you understand it, right, and you start using it and testing it, and getting practical uses, that was key. That was key for me in feeling comfortable and now being like an advocate to other colleagues when they express that fear of AI.
Yeah, so getting started and understanding the basics of AI. We have another question over here about how do we build trust in our local community about AI-driven journalism? So maybe we can, David, how about we hear from you about how are you building trust with it in your local communities?
Sure. I mean, I think one thing is to always disclose when you're using it, especially in a really substantive way. We do have tools as well to help with headlines and things like that. We don't just, disclose if it helps us write a headline. But anything that it does that is substantive in terms of the writing, we're disclosing that. Even though I do think in the long run, maybe that won't be necessary, but for right now it is. And I also think it is important to know what is like AI is not going to solve all problems, right? Like knowing the right way to use it or a clever use case rather than just using it because it's there. I think when you use it in a way that is focused and like purposeful, that way when you disclose it, people are like, oh, I see why they used AI. They did it to do some analysis that would have taken a human 3 days. They were able to do it really quick. I understand why they used AI. That makes total sense, right? So it's the disclosures that we do is that we used AI, what data we used it on, and why, essentially. And I think that why is really big in terms of letting people understand what the process of journalism is and how this tool is helping us do it in a better way to serve them.
Yeah, exactly. And we also have another question over here, Monsur, I think it would be a good one for you to take about how have your teams responded to the use of AI in workflows, any challenges and getting everyone on board with it?
Yeah, I think there's always a lot of challenges, especially because a lot of our editors, fact checkers are concerned about the ethical implications. What if it goes wrong? What if, a response is incorrect or something? But what we've done is to actually take those concerns and, use it in our product development. Like, okay, in such a case like this, what should be done? How do we let people know that, okay, this is an AI generated, so it might not be 100% accurate, just like what David said earlier. But I think the key thing for us for the wide adoption in my organization has been workshops. So we have particular workshops on opportunities in AI, which is an internal workshop for all of our team. And we also have like AI champions on each department, people who are just there to say, oh, let's try and see if we can use AI for this. And so just enthusiasts on each team. So those are the ways that we have gone about it.
Yeah, getting everyone upskilled on AI so that you can have a conversation about it and get them to not be fearful of it. There's also another interesting question over here. What kind of resources challenges have you experienced while using these tools in your newsrooms? So I think it'll be interesting to get from different perspectives about this issue. Sally, maybe we'll get started with this with you.
Yes, sorry, could you repeat it, Nikita? The
What
question.
kind of resource challenges have you experienced while using these tools in your newsrooms?
So definitely in the adaptation part of it, kind of making time for it. So if you can afford at least one or two people to be part of this from -0 that you're kind of thinking about the project, it's ideal, and to really get them to build this together, it will be key, because at the end of the day, because of resources, it's time, right? You're competing with everyone's time, and like anything new, then it's, when do we make time for this? So if you make it one, bringing people on board and trying to solve a problem that they have, no, not just something that we think might be useful. It's the really important part in our case, and then just adapting and being flexible and changing gears as you progress on the project.
Yeah. And I think, Rodney, it'd be interesting. You work with hyper-local newsrooms, right?
Yes. Yeah. The resources for us, kind of like Selly, is it's not technology or platforms, things like that. It's the bandwidth of the people and their attention. I think we've all probably been in situations where there's shiny object syndrome, and your boss comes in and is like, "Why don't we do this? Look at this fancy thing I saw the New York Times do." And those often are so distracting and just outside the realm of what reporters and editors and others are focused on day to day, getting the news out. So for us, I think reason I started with some of those things like the alt text generator was trying to think, okay, what's something that it could just shave off, carve back a little time from a reporter's busy day. And maybe it's 10 or 20 minutes, but you do that, 5 or 6 times a week, and suddenly there's an hour that they didn't have before. So I think AI, finding ways that it solves a problem, even if it's just like small problem, I think I at least was a little daunted first, like, oh, I have to build some monster amazing thing. It's like, no, like you just need to make someone's day a little faster, easier, and then they start getting their head around it, and then hopefully they come up with ideas and they go, oh, what if we could do it this way or apply it over there? So it's a good start.
Yeah. And we also have another question over here about who is accountable with AI when it gets it wrong, particularly in sensitive news topics. I think this question of accountability is really crucial. Monsur, how are you dealing with that in your newsroom?
So we build with the concept of explainable AI, and that's one way of trying to. I think most of our problems, based on the kind of products we've been building, has been around hallucination, and with the concept of explainable AI, it helps a little bit. So that's one way.
Explain what explainable AI means.
It's just like letting the AI models give reasons for a particular response. So check the trend monitoring system that I demoed earlier. You would find a section there for reason, like why have you ranked this one first? Something like that. But then secondly, the most important thing is the letting people know that this is AI generated. Like this is AI generated, so we cannot guarantee 100% accuracy on this. And when people see that and they understand, then it helps them understand how this should be taken. Like if you can get an information from an OpenAI model, you understand that, oh, you need to actually check whether this thing is accurate or not. So that accountability comes on the users as well.
Yeah, exactly. David, do you want to add to that?
The one thing I would add, and so I've done training now across all of our newsrooms, and a caveat that I always give, I mean, in the end, we're responsible is the short version, but what I say is like, you can cut down a tree with a handsaw and you can cut down a tree with a chainsaw. And you can cut down a tree with a chainsaw. It's a lot faster. It's a lot easier. But you really need to be holding that chainsaw with 2 hands, and you kind of have to be very aware of what you're doing, because if a handsaw brushes up against your leg, you'll probably be okay. If a chainsaw brushes up against your leg, it will ruin your whole day. And so, yes, these tools are really powerful, but like all tools, they kind of have a danger side to them. And so you have to be, holding the chainsaw with 2 hands and very aware of what, your eyes have to be open. So that's the kind of caveat that I give to the reporters, because in the end, we're the ones holding the chainsaw, so we're in the most danger.
Yeah, we have to always make that judgment. And I think this is a very interesting question that I often tend to get. And it says, I think what Rodney said about journalism being more than writing stories is key. It requires a real mindset change for editors and reporters. We're not just tapping technology to help produce stories, but developing products that expand our ability to provide useful information to the audience. Any thoughts from you about how to facilitate that culture shift in the newsroom? We are talking about a fundamental culture shift right now about thinking about this technology. So any thoughts you guys have about how do we facilitate that in newsrooms? Rodney, maybe we start off with you.
Yes, one way I think is to be transparent in its use and proud of its use, particularly people at the top, be it the editor or the publisher, whoever it is, not to be afraid of it and not to say, oh, this is the thing for the nerds in the basement. But to show that, we're using it in these ways. I think that demystifies it and can help others realize they can do it. And one other thing is, I think just using it as a thought partner, I find increasingly I do that, where there's so much stuff I turn to AI for that really doesn't directly ever manifest itself in the output of what I'm working on, a document or a presentation, but it's like the gestative or earlier versions of like thinking through things, asking questions, saying, be a skeptic and look at my budget and tell me where it's full of holes or where you're excited. And I just feel like it kind of like it's a trainer. But then when I get ready to go in the game, I'm much better prepared. I've thought through a lot of the options and questions and pitfalls versus coming into it fresh thinking, oh, shoot, I hope I thought of every possible angle on this. So that thought partner side of it, I think is very helpful.
Yeah. I'd love to get your thoughts as well, Sally, maybe, just like from an executive level, how are you thinking about when you're talking to journalists on the ground about this?
Definitely that transparency and opening that conversation and like a real open conversation where ethical questions are raised and it becomes a safe space for everybody. Because the moment someone feels like you're making them feel less or anything, right? That it's like, no, like we're all learning as we go. So let's make sure we'll, do the assignment and create a safe space for the questions, for the ethical discussions, and to be constructive about it and to be all across. Like Rodney said, sometimes, might have a leader like, hey, look at this new shiny object, but they don't even understand. And in this case, we all need to do the assignment of really understanding the technology, the power it has, and the possibilities. So we can carry those open conversations in a safe space and also ourselves be transparent that we don't know it all because it's changing so fast. And tap on those networks and those colleagues to discuss them.
David.
I would agree with and I like the way Rodney put it of it's not just about writing articles. I think we get stuck in articles, right? Like journalism at its core is collecting information, filtering information, and distributing information. And the distributing of information can be in article format, it can be video, it can be audio, etc. But I think, there 150 years ago, often the collection of information and the distribution were two separate moments, right? You had someone who went out and collected the information, they'd call in or they'd tap it in on the wire. And then there was a person who would write it up. And they were specialists. The person who could write couldn't necessarily report. The person who could report might not be able to write themselves out of a paper bag. We have kind of come in an age where those are the same person. And so I think we often get confused and we think of ourselves as writers or producers, video producers or whatever it is. But I think if anything, AI, not that it forces that separation, but it makes clear that separation, that really the journalism is the collecting, filtering, and distributing of information to make that useful in whatever format it is. And the formatting might get easier because of generative AI. And that actually, I think, makes it actually a really great time to experiment with things because we have that form factor that can be played with so easily. So if anything, I think it actually is a clarion call for journalists of like, well, what is the value that we bring that AI can't? And I actually think by making it clearer, we can focus in on really become experts on that.
Yeah, I think we should be asking about redefining the value of journalism in the age of AI, and what we do there. So great. We have had such an exciting discussion, but I'm going to get back to the next four panelists who are going to be sharing more of their presentations and what they've been working on. And then we will continue our Q&A with everyone at the end. So please continue to put your questions and we will be getting to them at the end. Now joining us is going to be Clare Spencer. She was formerly at NewsQuest and now she is the product manager at Podmorph. And so Clare, if you can please come online and begin sharing your screen.
Hi there. I can't share my video because it's disabled. I think Kyle has to do it. But you should be able to see my screen, right?
I am just
You
waiting.
can see my screen, yeah?
Not yet.
Oh, here we go. You
now
can see
it
me now. Can you see my screen as well now, yeah?
Perfect. Yes, can see it.
Wonderful. Hi, I'm going to show you how I made a video persona. But first of all, I want to tell you what I mean when I use the word persona. So I mean a imagined fictional character who is an aggregation of all the demographic characteristics of your target audience. So for example, here's Dave and Sue, and they were introduced to me as a journalist in a newsroom. I was told they're both 55, they've been married for more than 25 years. Dave's dad is ill and they're worried he has to go to a care home or not. They have 2 kids and their first child's going off to uni, and it will be the first kid in their whole family to go to uni. That was told to me more than 15 years ago at BBC Radio Stoke, and I still remember it. So personas can be a really memorable way of helping your journalists imagine their target audience. And in that case, they were presented to me as pictures. The BBC had paid for actors to have their pictures taken. Those pictures don't exist on the internet, apparently, so I've created these 2 with Adobe Firefly. And we had some text. But now I think it's possible we can do that really quickly with video in under half an hour. So I'll show you how. Now, first of all, my video apparently on Google Meet is a bit laggy. So I think someone's going to share the link to the Google Drive, but I'll just play a little bit of it.
My name is Aurora Simons Freeman, and my husband, Charles, and I have built quite the life together here in Boston. Charles retired from business a few years ago, and I've kept myself busy with the charity I've been running for over a decade now. It's been a beautiful journey, really. We're in our 6th.
That's enough, I think. Like I said, under half an hour, I really tried to make as little effort as possible to see how quickly I could make it. So it came from this, and I'm going to show you the whole workflow. This was not from the newsroom. It was a guest house owner who was imagining the target audience of her local history exhibition. This is the workflow. I extracted that text from that handwritten text using ChatGPT. Then asked ChatGPT to create a monologue based on Aurora. I then created an AI avatar on Veed.io, and I pasted in that monologue from ChatGPT. Now, to do this, I first had to choose these tools. So ChatGPT, and also I had to know that they had this functionality. And that's one of the challenges we have right now with generative AI tools. With ChatGPT, especially extracting the handwriting, I think I learned that on this course, the extracting the handwriting part. With the videos, this is just a few of the video generation tools out right now. It can be overwhelming. They all have different features, capabilities, output qualities, lengths, whether you can use an API, so that means you can integrate it with your workflow or not. And to be honest, so Veed.io is most similar to Synthesia on the bottom right, which is really marketing itself as to create training videos. So that's a real challenge, and it was a bit of luck that I happened to be playing around with it and knew it had that capability when I was presented with this need. So let me talk you through what it was like using Veed.io. First of all, selecting the avatar, it was pretty small. I couldn't tell their age. Secondly, accents. I actually wanted to use a different persona, but all 7 of the other guest house owners were using Welsh, and we didn't have a Welsh accent, Welsh Welsh person speaking English. So I used US. I'm sure that's not a Boston accent, though, is it? And the character count, that's absolutely fine for me. It was about 3,000 characters, which is 2.5 to 3 minutes. And then I generated it, and we'll just give you another little look of another little bit of it. So feel free to look at it on the link.
And waking up in a new place every few days, that feels like pure magic. We've sailed through some of the most beautiful parts of Europe, and each trip feels like a new adventure.
So,
My name is Aurora Simons Freeman,
whoops.
and my husband.
So yeah, so it really imagined this cruise ship person who loves cruise ships and visits, stays at this local guest house and watches this local exhibition. So it wasn't from the news area. But that doesn't mean it can't be, right? So I really encourage you. Now you know how quick, easy, and cheap. So this cost me $230, which is about $300 for an annual subscription. How quick, easy, and cheap it is to make these video personas, to think about, will this be useful to help my journalists imagine their target audience, to help them come away from themselves when they make those decisions about, is this new to my audience? Is this important to my audience? Is this interesting to my audience? And if you have, if you have any questions, do get in touch. I'm happy to show you more about how I made that. Also, as Nikita mentioned, I have moved on. I'm no longer an AI delivery manager at NewsQuest, where I was managing around 15 people who were AI-assisted reporters using text generation. I'm now a product owner using generative AI to help podcasters market their podcasts. So yeah, get in touch if you want to know more about that. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Claire. Interesting uses of more than just AI avatars that we can just put up there, but how do we understand our audience? Maybe get to answer those questions a bit more deeply. Joining us next is Dustin Block. He is the Senior Product Manager at Wearfora. Dustin, it's all yours.
Hello, everybody. Are we seeing the slides?
Yes, seeing it great.
Right.
Thanks.
What an amazing day. Thank you, Cooney, for the program. It's been remarkable for me and it came at a really important time in my career and development. So the project that I work on was something called audience-driven story pitching. And the idea was to create narratives that capture and engage target audiences. So I started in problem space. I don't know if you all are experiencing this, but at the time this program came around, there was an overwhelming number of AI tools. Everybody was pitching AI tools to product teams and newsrooms. I was working at Graham Media at the time, and it seemed like everything was this plus AI. Everything was coming back, and to simplify this down into something that was a little more practical, I went back to problem and tried to identify one clear problem that I was seeing in across the organization that maybe AI could help with. So the problem space I started on was poor story ideas. The idea here, this came out of research, and this isn't a knock on Graham Media newsrooms at all or anything like that. But the idea was, particularly in local TV, how do you differentiate and market? So I simplified it down to this concept. This is, please, they're great newsrooms. But the story ideation process is tricky, particularly when it's daily and you're doing multiple newscasts a day and you have to publish all the time. So they can struggle to come up with ideas. There's a lot of noise. So when audiences do respond, when you do that pitch, when you get feedback from the public, it's just overwhelming, right? If you've ever done a survey and you get 1,000 responses, you might as well have gotten 0, at that point, because it's just too much to work with. And then there's this idea of feedback loops. All the research is probably telling all of you, you got to close those feedback loops. You've got to build that relationship to have loyalty and retain your audiences and certainly to grow and find new audiences. But it can be really, really difficult in busy days to close those loops. So I started to look at that. So the prototype is this idea, this story pitcher, and it worked pretty simply. So the idea was publish a story, audience responds. We use Gen AI to summarize those responses, and then the prompts direct the AI to come up with story pitches back to the newsroom. All internal facing, but audience-driven ideation, right? That's the kind of the underlying idea here. So we have a couple of examples. The first was just, this is the first idea of, let's just take a daily news story, look at the comments on the story, direct a prompt to analyze those comments, and then suggest story ideas out of it. So here's a daily story out of San Antonio. The prompt was, you're a helpful engagement journalist interested in summarized comments and turning them into story pitches. Use the attached comments on the story and pitch 5 story ideas back to the KSAT newsroom. So here, there were comments on the article, 57 in this case. And this is what it came back with. This kind of question, who will prosecute now? Pretty relevant to the story, not super insightful. I mean, I think anybody would kind of get that, but sometimes even in the flow of the day, like something as simple as like, hey, is this in the article? Or like a lot of people are asking about this, maybe follow up here. So for second example, I was looking at a class of stories that were less timely on the day-to-day news cycle and a little bit more, evergreen or kind of topic based. And so here's a story from Houston around HOAs. I don't know if anybody here is from Houston, but apparently this is a huge issue in the city, very, very controversial. And so they did an article about parking mobile homes. And then we ran through slightly different prompts, but looking again for different ideas. And it was interesting, right? So again, the audience feedback led to breaking down misconceptions. And there was this idea that in the article, they had misnamed RVs, mobile homes, and trailers and confused those. And then there's this idea of power struggles and what you need to know about public street parking. And then just this idea of what are the rules. Again, not particularly insightful, but helpful when you get hundreds and hundreds of comments on a topic that you're pretty familiar with. It can surface what's most important to your audience. And then the third example, I started to get a little better at this and starting to see the tool kind of come into its own. This was a huge story in the Detroit area around a terribly tragic school shooting. And then if you might have seen this in the national news, the parents were actually charged for their role and they ended up going to prison. And this was a huge live stream trial across the market, lots and lots of attention on this story. We used the bot to run it through. And I started playing around with this idea of like, where do people seem confused or what questions do people have? And that was starting to get a little bit more interesting, especially in real time. So it was calling out gaps in the story and the audience was noting the gaps in the story and then asking these questions. And when enough people did it, it could pick up on that and then it could send those questions back to the newsroom. I thought this was starting to get a little bit more interesting. So you have things like, explaining the sentencing range or will they serve in the same place as their son? I don't think that question was ever specifically answered on the day or at that time. I could be wrong, but, and then the legal precedent implications, looking at this bigger picture, that's audience driven, right? And this is a way that like, the journalist is there trying to just cover the moment to moment, but here's the real information needs starting to surface. So the prototype results, as I was working on it, I could pretty reliably generate 5 to 10 follow-up story ideas from comment sections on articles. Not all stories were good candidates. If it didn't have enough comments, it wasn't very good. But if they were longer conversations, it worked pretty well. We analyzed hundreds, probably thousands of submissions. It could recognize reader questions and turn them into actionable pitches. So a lot of the threads, like if we posted something about politics, that was a lot of noise in the comments. But if it was something more day-to-day news, it was pretty good at calling out, information needs that people were sharing. And then it started to get some attention, which is great for me. So I'm now working over at Viafora Comment Company, right? And so they are, interested in how can we find more value in our UGC and connect it back to the editorial process. So what I learned, this was a little surprising to me. The proprietary models are really, really powerful. I wasn't aware of quite how much better they were than some of the, the open source or the free models. Product development is super helpful. I spent a lot of time trying to do a lot of the developing myself. As soon as I brought developers in, we moved much, much faster. Newsroom workflow testing, really important. The idea here is good. how to get these story pitches to the newsroom or to the reporters is still very much an open question. You know, is it a Slack channel, an email, a printout? I mean, these are real challenges, and I think, especially when you're thinking about product, can make or break, you know, how this works. The RAG piece, I think, is going to be really interesting as we get better at this. How do we, you know, enhance the prompts to return material that's more relevant and useful to specific newsrooms? And then tracking post-publication performance. You know, like I get this question a lot, like, okay, so if they did a follow-up story out of this, did those stories perform better? I think that's a really fair question and something that we need to look at. So what's next? Definitely more model and prompt testing, this whole productization piece to it, and then really looking at all UGC sources, not just comments, right? So can you use your Harkin responses? Can you use a help desk? Can you accommodate surveys? Any source of feedback from the public backend, can we take all of that, mix all of it together and identify, you know, kind of persistent information needs? You know, I'm very much inspired by like the Outliers of the world and the companies that do this really well. I think David's presentation really hit on it well. People have been working on this for a long time. I think it's proven out that if you can bring the audience into the process, you can generate really, really wonderful work. This may be a way to speed this up, right? Or to make it more applicable to more newsrooms in real time. So that's it. I would love to stay in touch. Reach out, please. And I would certainly love the feedback.
Great. Thank you, Dustin. Love the approach of understanding how can we understand our audience better. Another project using AI to help us drive more value for our audience through the journalism that we do. Now we're going to be moving on to Caiwei Chen. She is a freelance journalist, and she's going to talk about just how she's been using AI and some moving away from products that have been using AI. Caiwei, take it over now. Caiwei, if you can please unmute yourself and turn on your video.
Can you see the slides now?
See it all. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's so nice to meet everyone here and share a little bit about my experience at the program and my capstone projects. Yeah, so this has been an amazing experience learning with all these experts and professionals in the journalism industry, thinking about how AI has changed the work we do. And as a tech reporter, a journalist myself, I am looking at it more from the angle of how AI would improve our reporting and how we could use that to like use it back on AI to scrutinize and to critically examine the AI industry. So, and my capstone project is a project that tracked the changes in global AI data labor workforce. So, we all know that the large language models are very, very powerful, but they're only as good as the data they're fed. Currently, the companies, the main companies like OpenAI, like Google, Microsoft, and Baidu, they all source the data to train their large language model from multiple sources. There are like data scraped from the internet, data that's owned by the company, but there's also a lot of data that they purchase from third-party companies. This has fueled a data industry that produce, clean, and annotate data for these large players. So I chose to look at China, where there is a long-standing data cleaning industry for, we all know, censorship. But this market has grown so much with a lot of key companies that provide data, not just for Chinese AI companies, but also US tech giants like Google and Microsoft. So here I have some data on how big the industry is and how they cannot be overlooked. The data annotation or data processing gig, the labor workforce, usually do very simple tasks in like high repetition. If you look at the picture on the right, a lot of times they're drawing a box or separating the layers of a satellite image or like for autonomous driving. So they draw a box around the car, they separate a tree from the road or surroundings, and they put these little marks on a person's face for facial recognition. But now with more word-based large language models, a lot of new forms has emerged, and it seems like the data work AI is needing is becoming more sophisticated than ever. So I started my capstone project by looking at Boss-Chiping, which is China's biggest job site. And I found a lot of weird short-term, part-time, and even like temporary gig jobs. So these are some of them. We can see there is one like that looks for a data annotator who had formal vocal training. And there are some companies hiring people who have fiction writing experience, fan fiction and literature lovers preferred. So these are all very curious cases of how these third-party companies are hiring and using gig work to fill the data shortage and data gap in their current models. So and this is where the using AI to cover AI come in place. Through the data journalism training that I had at the program, and a lot of the introduction on how to use the tools. Me, who is someone who has never coded anything in my life, with the help with a software engineer friend, we created a data crawler that would collect the jobs from the target companies and compile them into a doc in order to analyze these jobs and see the trends. So I can only like be very brief on here, but we have already run it for about 2 months now. I believe now we have over 400 unique jobs with like 12 target companies, and it's going. So on the right, you can see a little bit of the translated version of the jobs we collected. So I use ChatGPT to sort data initially. We'll eliminate the repeating ones and translate the jobs into English. But on top of the data journalism component, I also did the traditional talk to sources journalism, where I try to reach out to people, mostly like student, interns, stay-at-home moms, or even disabled people who are participating in this kind of labor and get their stories. And these are some of the things I get. Some of the most like memorable and interesting things I found are a lot of the study abroad students in China coming from South Asia, Africa, or other places are recruited to as participants for like as interns or part-time workers for these companies to collect voice materials on low resource language. And also the labor condition is very, very questionable with these AI companies. So yeah, I think using AI to tackle the problems of AI might be my biggest takeaway from the program. And these are some more stuff that I found. I believe that like while we tend to believe that the data the data that these large language model have are all encompassing. They contains like almost all knowledge of the world that people could access. But when you actually look at what is funneled into it, these data tend to be very subjective, very imperfect, and and really gave us a fresh perspective of like what these AI models are good at and how we should use it. So yeah, so definitely reach out to me here. And besides my project, I also have been using so much AI in my own reporting work. Like recently, I've been using Notebook LM so much to chat with YouTube videos. Because like a lot of podcasts post their podcasts on YouTube now. So I use that to consume and condense knowledge. And I find a lot of AI tools to be a great, amazing accessibility tool that will summarize, translate, and make research process for journalists so much easier. Yeah, I hope this will be somewhat helpful to everyone else who's also thinking about how to do journalism as a reporter or in the newsroom and using AI and on AI, reach out to me at these places. And yeah, thank you to Nikita, Kyle, everyone at CUNY, and the wonderful cohort.
Thanks so much, Caiwei. Really inspiring to see how you've been experimenting and using AI in your work as a journalist. So it's not just about products that AI can help, but also as a journalist. And so now moving on, we're going to Ludwig Siegele. He is at The Economist, where he's the Senior Director of AI Initiatives. Ludwig is going to be our final speaker, so make sure you're putting all of your questions in the Q&A, and our panelists are going to be answering them. And with that, Ludwig, let's get started.
Hi there. Tech doesn't quite work, so sorry about that. Yeah, first of all, a huge thanks to you, Nikita, and CUNY for organizing this lab. It was really helpful for me in the stuff I'm doing at The Economist. So don't be too confused by this title, Navigating the Jagged Frontier of AI, but that was basically what I did when trying to implement my project. So why Jagged Frontier of AI? You probably all know that these LLMs, they can be very, very skillful or can do something very well at certain tasks, but other tasks which seem to be quite easy, they fail. So the hidden agenda, or not so hidden agenda of this project, was to find out, can they, or in what way can these models help us with editing? And how can we kind of combine these strengths of the technology with what humans do well? A few words about the importance of style at The Economist. As you can imagine, we take style very seriously at The Economist. We have a style guide of now, I think, 232 pages. And according to Claude, it has somewhat between 500 and 1,000 distinct rules. So, but this editing system, which has worked quite well over the years, is increasingly under stress. I mean, the senior editors at The Economist, the ones that do the editing, are increasingly time poor. We have more inexperienced colleagues who do not just writing, but videos, podcasts, and all of that. And also we need, if you want to do other AI services or projects like summarization or headlines, we need some style input. So my idea was to develop a style checker as an easy to access resource for writers. Writers can use it to self-edit, and editors can kind of do a basic edit with it. Perhaps writers can even develop their own personal style bot, and if it really works well, we can offer it as a paid service. So you've all heard about the hype cycle in tech, and I had my personal hype cycle with this project. So the first thing I did, I uploaded the style guide into a Claude project and wrote a clever prompt that also told it to be funny, though we have to work on that. And the idea was that you could query the style book, and that worked quite well, surprisingly well, because I was expecting it to hallucinate or make mistakes or not get things, but it's pretty good, and that seems at The Economist is actually quite a useful little tool, because we spend a lot of time going through the style book, finding stuff, and not finding it because it's not a style book that's made to be easy, to make it easy to look things up. It's whimsical, it's clever, but it's not kind of your typical style guide. So that worked, but then I quickly fell into the trough of disillusionment. So I said, yes, okay, we can query the style guide, that's fine, but how can I build something that actually can apply those rules to raw copy? And I did what you would expect to do. Kind of, I extracted the rules, I made them more machine readable, understandable. I grouped them, and I wrote a clever prompt and put all that in both in ChatGPT and Claude. And it was a complete disaster. It didn't work. It couldn't see commas. It couldn't see colons. It couldn't see even entire words. And so I discovered the problem. And again, back to the jagged frontier of AI, kind of the thing that what these models cannot do is reason on the level of individual characters. They reason on the level of words and tokens. And yeah, they always predict the next likely word. But if you tell it to kind of make sure that there is no colon in the headline, these models can't do it. And the other thing is, if you have lots of rules and you put them in a prompt, or even if you chain them together in several prompts, it confuses the model. So I stopped working on that, and I kind of reassessed, and I decided to build a style guide for a specific type of copy, in this case, what we call espresso chunks, which are news briefs in our espresso app. And that's an app which gives you kind of the daily news or what to pay attention to today every morning. And so I went to the editors, who we call baristas of the espresso app, and asked them, what are the rules you want to be in such a style guide for espresso chunks? And they gave me a rather short list, 24 rules, which I then turned into a prompt. And I used Python. I used all the fancy things like step-by-step reasoning. And I also added some other features. I said, okay, these models are pretty strong at making you suggestions for headlines or for first sentence or last sentences, and added that. And yeah, I mean, it actually worked quite well. I mean, it's not perfect, but I think it can speed up the editing process of these chunks to some extent. I kind of threw it over the wall. It's now being used by our baristas, and they'll soon give me feedback. And then the idea is also to teach them how to improve that tool themselves. So they learn the prompt engineering, they learn the writing of these type of these kind of tools. So next steps, yeah, I still kind of have the dream of building the intergalactic style guide for The Economist, and I have some ideas, and perhaps at some point it'll work once these models get better. But I've started thinking about the interface. So how can I deliver a style guide, be it kind of a broad one or a small one, a more narrow one? And yeah, I mean, one possibility is a Chrome extension, so it's easy to access. A lot of people at The Economist write actually in Google Docs, and so as a script or a kind of an add-on to Google Docs would be a possibility. We could do thematic prompts. Kind of Americanism is a problem at The Economist. People use them more and more, so we could have a thematic style guide or style tool. Yes, and then look at other use cases. I mean, if I can get a style tool to work for chunks, I can probably also get it to work for marketing and summarization. So what are the lessons here? I would say, yeah, start small. Yeah, be very disciplined when it comes to prompt writing, and you should always expect the tools or the models to get better. I mean, I kind of got safe with this project because Claude 3.1 came along. Before that, ChatGPT or GPT-4 just wasn't good enough for what I was trying to do. And of course, what's also important here is that, yes, these tools, the style tool or StyleBot can help you, but as a journalist, you always have to read the style book. And I would, I mean, when I talk to my colleagues about it, I tell them this is not going to replace the style book. You need to read this. You need to be familiar with it. Yes, and I have a small little demo, if I can get it to work. A colleague of mine and I've built this chatbot, which is basically the Ask the Style Guide version, or the Slack version of the Ask the Style Guide version I built in Claude, and it should work. I hope, at least. Let's say, is truck and Americanism. And it should retrieve the data. It takes a while. Yeah. So yeah, it works. And so the idea is to kind of, this is as I said, still experimental, but the idea is to put this into our main Slack instance, so everybody at The Economist can, if they want to, in every channel, check what the style book says about certain things. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ludwig. And what an incredible showcase of projects from global newsrooms, big and small. So if I can have everyone over here, please turn back on your videos, because we are going to get into some exciting Q&A. We have had a lot of people put in questions over here. And Please continue to do. We have this amazing wealth of knowledge right here. Each one of them, 8 innovators in the news industry, have been actively thinking about AI implementation and have been spending the past few months on it. So this is your chance to ask them anything about their projects, their challenges, advice, surprises. So please put in those questions into your Q&A. And with that, let's dive in with our first question. And I think this is something that I would like to hear everyone on this. So Sally, Caiwei, and Monsur, you as well, if you can just turn on your videos, that would be great. So let's talk about the first thing, a question about the capstone project that's over here. And just for context for everyone on this call, all the participants, applicants, when you were applying for this project, came in with an idea of what they would want to work on as their capstone project. And one of the most fascinating parts, I would say, is watching each of you zero in on what you would focus on and how that shifted as well during the duration of the program. So I want to get into this question that's here, that with so many uses for AI, how difficult was it to narrow on to a specific capstone project in your organization? So maybe we can start with, who wants to start here? Ludwig?
I can start. I mean, it's pretty short answer. Kind of, I could decide that myself, and so that was pretty easy. And again, kind of that I tried to explain what the problem is. So I picked what I perceived as the biggest problem in the organization and ran with it.
Yeah. Claire, how about we hear from you?
I think that this question is deceptively simple. It actually zones in on the issue of, do you look at your needs, your users' needs, or the technical capabilities first? And I think they kind of intertwine with each other because, so in my case, I looked at user needs. I was always like playing around with the capabilities so that when I saw a need, I was actually looking for a different need. I was looking to validate, as part of some user research, validate the problem that people who share a message need to put it in different forms so that the people who they're sharing the message to more effectively receive that message. So I was looking at podcasters and anyone who makes messages, and then I observed the teacher. So I observed a teacher of a local history class, and that handwritten note was by a student in that class. But I had also, for that class, been playing around with the technical capability. So I knew that this thing was possible to make a persona really quickly. And then I saw the need that maybe they need this. So although we're quite often taught to, well, in my experience, having worked in prototyping for the last 3 years, the fashion is to be taught that you have to go with the user need first. If you completely ignore, well, what is actually technically capable, what are you actually technically capable of doing, then you might hit your head against the wall. And when you're trying to solve this problem for a user. So short answer, I was looking for user need, but playing around with the technical capabilities and saw another user need, which I knew could be solved.
Yeah.
Bit long, sorry.
Yeah, going into the user needs. Dustin?
I think it's just there's so much you can do that it was a little overwhelming, and like I was doing some really silly stuff that was entertaining myself, but maybe not solving a need. So narrowing in on an actual problem and then validating that problem with the newsrooms. Go like, hey, if I could help you with this, would that work? As soon as I got that from them, then I was like, okay, I'm just gonna stick here. Otherwise, I'm gonna be making video avatars of myself and doing all sorts of like crazy fun, super interesting stuff, but maybe not super practical for day to day.
Yeah. Rodney, how about you?
I changed my plan coming in. I was going to do something with comments, maybe a little more similar to what Dustin did. But mine was similar to what a lot of people said. There's a paralysis of choice that certainly is real. But I looked at a real-time problem we were having, which as we were introducing user needs to the reporters and editors, it's an abstract concept and it takes a little bit to get your head around. And so I realized that there's a lot of fumbling and iterating, like what is this story, that or this, or what would be a better way to do it? So I found a way that it's like, okay, I could help solve a little problem here that has in my mind, had two benefits. One, it solved that problem for the reporters, but two, in context of the class, it was a kind of discrete, finite issue I could wrap my head around and get more fluent and comfortable with this. And then hopefully down the road, I'll, take on more ambitious stuff, but it was a good fit for that.
David, how about you? How did you prioritize what project should you be working on?
I mean, for me, really it came down to, well, one, I'm always interested in sort of that engagement space of journalism and media. And really I was thinking about old projects that I had worked on and where they, basically failed, or where like there were too many pain points, because generative AI really has made me rethink a lot of things from earlier on in my career and be like, oh man, if only we had that back then. And so like, well, I have it now. Let's see what we can do with it now. So that was really, I think, the main inspiration for Feedback Loop.
Sally.
Yeah, so when I started the program, I did have two ideas. The first one is to create a handbook or kind of a framework for how journalists, especially investigative and independent journalists, of like how to use AI. What are the things to be aware of? What are the ethical concerns and probable complexities, especially when communicating with your newsroom. And the other idea is what I'm currently doing, which is a reporting project on AI. So I still feel like the first project has a lot of value, but I think what I learned along the way is a lot of people are in the conversation, not just me. And I think by using AI in my reporting process to report on AI, it's like a process where I can figure out as I go. And it's just like really great to see institutions like AP. And I've recently like met another journalist who's been writing this kind of guide and framework. So yeah, I feel like that's the impossibility of choosing everything. But I think like just by being in the conversation and being part of other people's work that also contribute to the same goal makes me feel really good.
Yeah, you were able to integrate it into your work directly. Stelly, how about you?
To be honest, I'm trying to recall what did I was my proposal and I can't recall it. But in this case, it was, trying to solve something and I'd be like Dustin, like try to is something that I was like grasping my head around. It's like, and adding to the fact of, because of what we're talking of time and resources in local newsrooms and smaller newsrooms, something that I could do also independently. I could bring people in to solve certain things, on the engineering side, but that I could also do on my own. And I think we talked about it, Nikita. Wait, like I kind of did this in a week. It was a weekend kind of thing. That was the amount of time it took me. Once I understood, of course, taking the side of all the learning that I had with you and the cohort. But once I sat down and started working on it, it was about a weekend. What it took me to work on this. So yeah, that would be it.
How about you, Monsur?
I think for me, I was really clear about the problem before getting the opportunity. So, it was just a problem in time, and it fit perfectly to what the program was about. So it was kind of straightforward for me.
Yeah. Okay. This is another question that I think a lot of people would benefit from. What tips, tricks, and tactics have you found useful when talking about AI with skeptical colleagues? Anyone wants to take that? Anyone has some cool tips?
Yeah, I can. Sorry.
Go ahead, Ludwig.
I mean, they're actually very useful, the skeptics. So in this case, of course, we especially some older colleagues, they're very skeptical of something like a style bot. But I recruited them to be the testers, and that helped quite a lot. And so I think if you're trying to impose a tool, it's not going to work. You have to build it with them, and you have to test it with them, and you have to also be willing to say, okay, this is not going to work. We're not going to do it if that is the case.
Yeah, failure is an option, and saying no to do that. It's Sally.
Yeah, I was gonna add that it's kind of along those lines, and they're bringing them along and showing them, right? And I think that part we were talking before of creating that safe space. It's okay to be a skeptic. Let's talk about it. What are the doubts, and walking them through those doubts? It's like just show and tell kind of thing, right? In my case, has been super useful, and you get a lot of aha moments in that scenario.
Okay, another question that's over here, and I think an important question for us to talk about is AI takes a lot of energy to run and has detrimental effects on the climate. So how do we as journalists use AI and think about the sustainability with it consuming so much energy? Who wants to go ahead with that?
I can.
Go ahead, Ludwig.
I mean, it's certainly a thought that occurred to me more than once when I was kind of trying to build this prompt for the style guide. I mean, that's like 2 weeks, pretty intensive work. And I mean, I don't want to know how my footprint, carbon footprint has increased doing that. But with all technology, yes, these or not with all technology, digital technology, yes, they use a lot of energy, but the amount of energy they use being trained or in inference is going down. And I also think we should not forget that we probably need tools like that to solve global warming, to solve that problem. We need to make our economy more efficient, and I think not the only way, but I think a very good way is using technology like AI. And so, yes, we'll use it. It'll burn a lot of energy, but I think in the end, the outcome will be net positive.
I had an interesting thing happen this week, which maybe could add to this. I wonder whether we should ask, does this actually have to be AI, or can it just be normal code like before? So this week we made a prototype which was generative AI. We showed it to the users, validated, yeah, this is what we want, and then the software engineers spent a day making it without any AI. So it was quick and easy. The way AI, there's some of the conveniences with generative AI is that you can just subscribe, these small payments, and you don't have to put in lots of software engineering time before making something. But maybe then you can switch if it isn't actually if the generative AI aspect of it isn't needed, you can switch to then making, building it yourself with, just a software engineer doing the code.
Yeah. Okay. And another, sorry, was this something else? Yeah, Caiwei.
Yeah, so like about the climate and energy, I think like AI's impact on climate and its use of energy is one of the most like underreported areas in AI, and it's like hugely interesting and important. And as a reporter, I definitely like look forward to do more work on that. And one of like the reasons that AI as a reporting field is so it's so like centralized, it's so so much of it is about the big players in the field already. And like a tiny player almost have no chance to build something as big is because it takes so much computing power and so much energy. And an honest answer to that, I think, is just like there's honestly not much we can do about it. But I feel like as a reporter or as journalism industry, one of our mission is to critically look at it, to use these tools to eventually like hold these companies and the industry accountable for what they're doing. So in a way, I feel like it's the same thing that's like my project. AI as a tool and AI as a subject itself can be discussed separately. And I feel like just to like look at it and try to distinguish what is hype and what is actually beneficial is definitely a good start to me to for us to start reflecting on like the surging electricity and energy like this industry is consuming.
Yeah. And going back to Caiwei again, there's another question for you, which I think would be very important to talk about. It's from a freelance journalist who says, when you initially had the idea for the story, where did you decide to look for data? How did you make this decision? From interviews or previous knowledge? Are there places you always go for preliminary research? In the pre-AI days, Google was an easy place to dip a toe in the water. So how are you going about finding that information to help you with your investigation there?
Right. Yeah, thank you for the question. I think so like just to clarify, I don't start my research with AI. I almost never start my research with AI. So I start my research somewhere else. It's either I read a lot of news articles, I'm on most of the apps under the sun. I'm very chronically online, so much more than I would like to admit. I'm on a lot of apps, on the Chinese app, on the American apps. I look at what people post, and I look at the some of the business results. And how I started following this job site and the labor data is actually when I saw a news piece about Speech Ocean, which is this AI data company. Their stock was doing so well over the years, but there's very little news coverage on it. So I started digging into that. I started going to a lot of social media. I see people posting about the gigs they're doing. And that's how I got like the idea of doing this project. I feel like the process has pretty much been the same. And like since I started my career in 2019 and in China. So that's like almost when COVID started exactly. So my experience of reaching out to people, to sources, has almost like my instinct is just to do that online instead of like go to talk to the people on the street. It's not like I don't do that, but I feel like having being at the places where you're curious about, like a lot of times it's an online forum or it's a corner of social media, and like use AI to help you go down that rabbit hole deeper is the way I like to see it.
Yeah. And talking about data, there's another question about the legal issues surrounding that. So how do you manage the legal issues with all of these data, article from your news going into these AI services? Do you have to get a green light from the legal teams? How does that happen within your newsroom? Maybe Ludwig, how are you doing it with The Economist?
Sorry, I couldn't hear your question.
Sorry, so this is about how do you manage the legal issues with all of the data and the articles from your newsroom going into these AI services? What are the legal issues you're thinking about over there? Do you have to get green light from your legal teams?
Yeah, definitely. And so whenever we kind of use or decide to use a tool, there's a lengthy negotiation going on where we basically get enterprise license agreement where, and one of the terms is always no data can be used for training. And in most cases, that's accepted when you spend some money. In other cases, it's more problematic. But that's the sine qua non. I mean, we won't use a generative AI service that uses our data for training.
Anyone else has to add on that, Dustin?
We had our lawyers, had to look at it, but once we got into the APIs and had the agreements, it became less of an issue, particularly on internal facing uses. So I was surprised. I thought the lawyers would hold it up more, but they were surprisingly supportive. I guess the agreement is fairly straightforward.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, David.
I was gonna say the one other thing I would add, again, once you get into the APIs, it's a little bit safer. But again, in terms of lawyers and their interest, and this might vary from organization to organization, they have a concern about us using it for photos, for example, that aren't licensed, not because we're giving up our data, but because it's a bad look if later we want to sue someone for using our data, then we can't be using other people's data. And images is the most like sort of susceptible to that sort of bad look.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
one point I would like to add is it's interesting that all our lawyers were not used to working with startups, and so that was new to them, and it took some hand holding kind of to get those two parties together. And I think one should keep that in mind. If I mean, working with Google or negotiating with Google, I think that they know how to do, but working with kind of a startup out of LA, 5 people is more of a problem. So yeah.
Yeah. And getting to our final question, I think this is a good one to end on, about how are you introducing AI into your new logistically and tactfully? You have all of these AI tools and different ways in which AI is being incorporated. So how are you thinking about rolling that and these initiatives out into your newsroom broadly? Who'd like to get started on that? David?
I'll get started. Yeah. And then I apologize. I might have to run afterwards because I'm on the West Coast and I got to take my kids to school. But I'd say this: one, it is a process, right? Like I think it is about ingratiating the idea. Like we have just done training with all of our reporters, and that training isn't super into the deep end. It's, the surface level, right? So I think, step by step. I think it's also about making sure that they feel that they have an input back into it. So we're also sort of, we have an infrastructure now to take ideas and make sure those ideas go through a technical evaluation, a legal evaluation, like we just talked about, and then go from there as to whether or not we're going to start to implement it. So, again, this all depends, I think, on the size of your organization, but the larger the organization is, the more I think it is one of those situations where you've heard the phrase like measure twice and cut once. I think laying the groundwork, because it is a sensitive topic, right? You do have to make sure that you have the right intention on how you're going to use it. Make sure that intention is expressed so people don't feel like this is threatening. Because I do think that is a concern, right? If you just sort of blow the door open, I think people will start to get nervous, right? But if you're like thoughtful about it and include people into the conversation, it's a little bit slower, but it is a much more stable foundation upon which you can build the infrastructure to use AI going forward for the next 5-10 years.
Rodney, Matt?
Yeah, one thing we're trying now is because we have this challenge that I mentioned when I spoke about our project, that we have all these tiny newsrooms across the US. And so we're trying something now where we're doing a pilot for 3 months with 12 of the newsrooms. It's about a dozen or so people, one from each newsroom. Each one represents 1 or 2 people back home, but we've got them sharing a tool and doing a project together. That the application is local for them, but we're putting them together in Slack. We're having some Zoom webinars and hoping to build, a community within our larger organization of a few hundred people, where we'll kind of create some evangelists, hopefully, as well as get experience with the tools and just get more fluency with them. But it's hard. A challenge I have is the product lead for this larger. It's a mid-sized company, but large in terms of number of newsrooms. Is I can't really go door to door to 65 newsrooms and train them. So we're trying this pilot way to do it so that we'll have delegates in each of our 3 states: Colorado, Georgia, and Maine, and hopefully they will then kind of show their peers and colleagues how to do it. So we evangelize it that way.
Yeah, building a community of AI evangelists. Dustin?
One thing I can just add quick, one step before, and before David's point, work with the willing. You can just kill stuff by just immediately going to your toughest critic. And I would say, like, bring them in when you have to, but nothing kills an initiative more than, like, I got this cool idea, and then you take it right to the publisher or the news director or whoever that kind of powerful potential opponent is. They will shut you down, right? Like, you have to demonstrate value, and you can do that. I mean, the beautiful thing about these tools, there's so many available. You can demonstrate value really quickly. Start there, then bring them something and go like, hey, look what I can do, right? And we had at Graham, we were having a lot of luck with that, with people who wanted to do it. It didn't work to push it on people. it worked very well to let people who were interested raise their hand and join the committee and then test out a bunch of stuff. That was a much more active, interesting group, versus, kind of like everyone needs to do this now.
Yeah. It'll be helpful to hear, Monsur, from your perspective as well. How are you rolling out, when you're rolling out a tool, how are you doing that?
For us, we have over 100 people internally, so that's always our first set of users, and we get a lot of feedback. It's usually on a call, and everybody is forced to respond or give feedback or something, and it gives us a comprehensive way to take a look at things. And some people are saying, oh, this thing is giving me garbage, and you have to point it out, oh yeah, that's because you put garbage in. And so it's usually a call and getting everybody. So we do the first user testing in that regard, and then sometimes we use another newsroom or a fact-checking organization, something like that, and we ask them to test out this and then give us some feedback as well, and before we roll out to the general public.
Yeah, getting everyone to test it out. Any other final insights from the rest of our panelists?
Yeah, I'd say, first of all, that what Monsur said about garbage in, you'd be surprised how few people understand that you put garbage in, you get garbage out. So that has to be said many times in many different ways. But also, you don't just get a people who think AI is going to take their job. And, parts of that might be justified, it might not. We just don't know yet at the moment. So, and then, but also you get the people who think that AI is silver bullet. And I have seen a person who has switched from one to the other. Such a good job was done on on persuading them that it's not going to take their job. That then they thought it was the silver bullet, and they could put garbage in and get diamonds out.
Yeah. Any other insights?
And I would like to add that I think I know there are like a lot of executive level folks here. So I think before implementing an AI strategy or AI initiative in your newsroom, maybe I think listen to the reporters and see how they are already using AI in their work. And maybe I think they will have a lot of interesting insights and suggestions themselves.
Absolutely. Journalists are using AI, so getting insights from themselves. Sally, I would love to hear from an executive perspective how you're thinking of it.
So for me, it's really important, for like I mentioned before, for and other leaders that might be here, for me to understand it before I roll anything out, and also be vulnerable and transparent in that way that, yes, I learned this, but this is always evolving. So let's evolve all together and share as much of that with the teams. And like Caiwei was saying, also getting a lot of feedback and listening from reporters, right? From people that are already using the tools, who can become, those ambassadors and help you. Some of the things that we did was similar to what also Dustin and David were mentioning, which is trainings with smaller teams. Instead of doing a massive newsroom, massive meaning, still local, still smaller, but everyone, 40 people, let's go by 5, 8 people. It doesn't matter if we have to repeat it a lot but that creates kind of a better environment for everyone to ask questions. So that was one of the main things we also did. And then from there, you can also start identifying who are either those that are skeptical, so you can start bringing them in, or the ones that are like, I want an in, I want to learn more. And that's super helpful as well.
Yeah. Any final insights from you, Ludwig, your approach to AI implementation at The Economist?
I think it's not a question of kind of in the individual tool. I mean, that remains to be seen. I won't be able to predict what kind of tools we'll use in 5 years or so, but I think it's important to build the right infrastructure to create those tools, and that's kind of the technical infrastructure. That's the right platform to build data pipelines and all things. But it's also having training classes, kind of getting upskilling people and creating the right culture to experiment. And unfortunately, at The Economist, it's a culture. It always has been a culture to experiment with articles in this case, but I think in the future we'll also kind of treat AI services, AI tools a bit like articles.
Yeah, and that's a great place to end on. Think of AI as building the infrastructure for AI right now in our newsrooms and upskilling everyone. And thank you all for joining us. This has been an incredible showcase of projects. And for everyone over here today who is watching, you might be at the beginning of your AI journey. These experiences really just show about the crucial importance of AI literacy, which was made possible here at the AI Journalism Lab, thanks to support from Microsoft, who funded this entire project so that 25 people could get upskilled on AI. Just a quick few announcements to wrap up everything. This is not the end of the AI Journalism Lab. In fact, very exciting. We have 2 new AI Journalism Labs that are launching in 2025 with support from Microsoft. One's going to be focused on leadership and another one on adoption, more on those who are the early journeys of beginning their journey with AI. And then our new AI lab that has just opened up is an AI community engagement lab with the Newmark J School Center for Community Media and the Walton Family Foundation. Applications are open right now until December 6th, and you can scan this code over here, the QR code, to get more details about it. This is more focusing on how can we engage with our community a bit more with the help of AI. And with that, thank you all so much for joining us. I have to thank our incredible group of instructors and coaches as well, who have been a part of this journey and have helped everyone over here upskill themselves on AI. And thank you to all 8 of you for sharing your projects. And thank you to Microsoft for making this possible. Bye.